Today, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo unveiled the official 9/11 commemorative flag that will fly at the World Trade Center Memorial Site this Sunday when we mark 10 years since 9/11. The flag has 40 yellow stars that represent the passengers on Flight 93. The 5 sides represent the Pentagon. The Twin Towers are depicted in the center, and underneath are the words, "I remember." 9/11 was a defining moment for our country and its leaders. It's hard to forget the images of then Mayor Rudy Giuliani grasping a mask as he walked through lower Manhattan, or of President George Bush speaking at Ground Zero.
As most of us sat stunned, glued to the TV for days, politicians turned into emergency responders.
As we mark 10 years since 9/11, Fox Connecticut's Lori Perez talked with former Governor John Rowland about the call to action.
Like so many of us, former Governor John Rowland recalls the morning of 9/11 with remarkable clarity. Otherwise forgettable details are etched in his memory as the moment when. It was just after 9 a.m. Rowland was in the governor's residence meeting with business executives about how to support the Greater Hartford Open Golf Tournament.
And all of a sudden, my trooper came in and said, "You got to take this call."
It was the governor's chief of staff calling, Lisi Kaufman, sister of President Bush's chief of staff, Andy Card. Card was the one who whispered in the president's ear that morning, telling him America is under attack. His sister would then follow his lead.
And she said, "Listen, I don't know what's going on. I just got a message from my brother. Something is wrong. We're under attack."
And Rowland immediately put Connecticut on the defensive, freezing airspace around Millstone Nuclear Power Station, forcing himself and the state's commissioners to start imagining the unimaginable.
I mean, crazy things. Would they attack the Travelers Tower? I mean, you start to think through across the state. We have Groton submarines. We have anywhere from 8 to 16 nuclear submarines sitting there.
All the while wondering how many of Connecticut's 40,000 daily commuters would be coming home. Rowland decided to see for himself and was at the station as the first trains came back to Fairfield County.
And I'll never forget, as people began to come off the train, you can just see their shock. And there you are, you know, in your safe little environment here in Connecticut, and they've got gray, dust all over them. And I was so taken back. And I grabbed one woman and I said, "Can we help you?"
He assembled armies of counselors as the National Guard, waves of paramedics and civilian volunteers with a crush of supplies staged at Sherwood Island in Westport, preparing for what exactly they didn't know. Rowland called New York Governor George Pataki to say they'd emptied hospitals in Fairfield County of patients, that Connecticut surgeons and nurses were at the ready to care for casualties.
Someone said to me, "Governor, we appreciate that, but we don't expect many injuries." And all of a sudden it just hit me, oh my gosh, these people, you don't survive an implosion. There's no injuries. We've lost these people.
In the end, Connecticut lost 152 residents. Rowland called the families of every single one of them. He spent days dialing their numbers, even with a team of counselors by his side, not entirely sure of what to say.
That is a great point, because as you make the call, you're making a cold call. This is the governor calling you.
Days after 9/11, Rowland went to Ground Zero with President Bush. While he'll never forget the president's rallying cry,
"And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon."
It's another scene that gives him pause.
The greatest sign of grace that I had seen in my life was as we were leaving, and we were down there with our canine units and searching for people. There were thousands of people lined up on both sides of the street, and they're just sitting there applauding all the volunteers, firemen and police and volunteers and cars and people walking, and they were just standing there for hours, and just lined up for a mile.
Our coverage of 9/11 10 years later continues in tomorrow morning's Current. Reporter Matt Kaufman brings us the story of how the events of September 11th, 2001 prompted one young man to serve his country and pay the ultimate price.